Welcome to Fortune Forecast, and you are in my book playlist. We are going through the book titled Your Forces and How to Use Them by Christian D. Larson. I am your hostess, Daisy, and if you are new to my channel, welcome. Glad you found us. And to our Fortune community, thank you so much for your support. All right. I'm going to just do a recap of what I thought were my takeaways from our previous chapter. I hope that you've been garnering some information that might be helpful and useful to your growth. When he mentioned the laws of mental construction and growth, I am usually taken when these authors talk about laws. Where are these laws, the natural laws? Well, I do know for myself that I feel inside of me that I understand that there are certain laws, and I feel them really deeply. And what I'm interested in is getting more information of what they are so that I can amplify my awareness and better understanding of what I feel inside with what I'm experiencing out here. So, in the pursuit of getting more information so I can better understand the power of the mind, the laws that govern the mind. And not that I'm endorsing this particular group, but if you do find more information on it, please, I do hope that you can share links and references here in our community. So there's this website called Summit Hypnosis and Wellness, and in their studies, they had a page titled, What Are the Natural Laws of the Mind? In that particular study, in their section number 3, they talk about, because this particular chapter is about imagination, a lot of it. In this study, they mentioned that images are the property of the subconscious mind, and 88%. And it says those images will always overpower what you think, which is about 12%. So as we went deeper into that chapter about the impressions versus what we think, it is leading to that many of us really don't think. So then let's go to our next point that I garnered was we are creators. And in that creation, it starts with your imagination. So let's take a look. Take a moment. You can pause this video. Take a look at anything around you right now. Anything. All those objects were once in someone's imagination. And through their focused attention and followed with an action, those imagined objects have now become manifestations. There you go. So when we go back now to my next point, which is taking time to imagine your world as you idealize it. Imagine you in that world. Imagine your surroundings. Imagine your friends. Imagine the job you'd like to have. Taking time to imagine is that first step in training your mind. So that is, imagination is like weight training to the muscle. When we take time to sit and imagine, we are training the mind. Okay, and my last point that I want to bring is how to become a mastermind. And so this author defines a mastermind as someone who thinks their own thoughts. And I would like for you to take a minute, as I have, and not with judgment, but just really observe how much of your thoughts are really yours. All right. Having said that, we're going to go in Larson style and jump into the next chapter. I will read the wisdom and introduction, and then I will announce the chapter and we'll get right to it. Sit back and get comfortable. Let's get started. Follow the vision of the soul. Be true to your ideals no matter what may happen now. Then things will take a turn, and the very things you wanted to happen will happen. The ideal has a positive drawing power towards the higher, the greater, and the superior. Whoever gives his attention constantly to the ideal, therefore will steadily rise in the scale. Take things as they are today and proceed at once to make them better. Expect every change to lead you to something better, and it will. As your faith is, so shall it be. To be human is not to be weak. To be human is to be all that there is in man, and the greatness that is contained in the whole of man is marvelous indeed. Chapter 19. The higher forces in man. It is the most powerful among the forces of the human system that we least understand, and though this may seem unfortunate, it is not unnatural. All advancement is in the ascending scale. We learn the simplest things first and the least valuable in the beginning. Later on, we learn that which is more important. We find therefore the greatest forces among those that are almost entirely hidden, and for that reason they are sometimes called the hidden forces, the finer forces, or the higher forces. As it is in man, so it is also in nature. We find the most powerful among natural forces to be practically beyond comprehension. Electricity is an illustration. There is no greater force known in nature, and yet no one has thus far been able to determine what this force actually is. The same is true with regard to other natural forces. The greater they are, and the more powerful they are, the more difficult it is to understand them. In the human system, there are a number of forces of exceptional value that we know nothing about. That is, we do not understand their real nature, but we can learn enough about the action, the purpose, and the possibilities of those forces to apply them to practical life. And it is practical application with which we are most concerned. The field of the finer forces in mind may be termed the unconscious mental field, and the vastness of this field, as well as the possibilities of its function, is realized when we learn that the greater part of our mental world is unconscious. Only a fraction of the mental world of man is on the surface or up in consciousness. The larger part is submerged in the depths of what might be called a mental sea of subconsciousness. All modern psychologists have come to this conclusion, and it is a fact that anyone can demonstrate in his own experience if he will take the time. In the conscious field of the human mind, we find those actions of which we are aware during what may be called our wide-awake state. And they are seemingly insignificant in comparison with the actions of the vast unconscious world, though our conscious actions are found to be highly important when we learn that it is the conscious actions that originate unconscious actions. And here, let us remember that it is our unconscious actions that determine our own natures, our own capabilities, as well as our own destiny. In our awakened state, we continue to think and act in a small mental field. But all those actions are constantly having their effect upon this vast unconscious field that is found beneath the mental surface. To realize the existence of this unconscious mental world, and to realize our power to determine the actions of that world, is to awaken within us a feeling that we are many times as great and as capable as we thought we were. And the more we think of this important fact, the larger becomes our conscious view of life and its possibilities. To illustrate the importance of the unconscious field and your finer forces, we will take the force of love. No one understands the nature of this force, nor has anyone been able to discover its real origin or its actual possibilities. Nevertheless, it is a force that is tremendously important in human life. Its actions are practically hidden, and we do not know what constitutes the inner nature of those actions, but we do know how to control those actions in a measure for our own good. And we have discovered that when we do control and properly direct the actions of love, its value to everybody concerned is multiplied many times. It is the same with a number of other forces with which we are familiar. They act along higher or finer lines of human consciousness, and they are so far beyond ordinary comprehension that we cannot positively know what they are. But we do know enough about them to control them and direct them for our best and greatest good. In like manner, the unconscious mental field, though beyond scientific analysis, is sufficiently understood as to its modes of action, so that we can control and direct those actions as we may choose. When we analyze what comes forth from the unconscious field at any time, we find that it is invariably the result of something that we caused to be placed in that field during some past time. This leads up to the discovery of unconscious mental processes, and it is not difficult to prove the existence of such processes. Many a time, ideas, desires, feelings, or aspirations come to the surface of thought that we're not aware of having created at any time. We come to the conclusion, therefore, that they were produced by some unconscious process. But when we examine those ideas or desires carefully, we find that they are simply effects corresponding exactly with certain causes that we previously placed in action in our conscious world. When we experiment along this line, we find that we can produce a conscious process at any time, and through deep feeling cause it to enter the unconscious mental world. In that deeper world, it goes to work and produces according to its nature the results coming back to the surface of our conscious mentality days, weeks, or months later. The correspondence between conscious and unconscious mental processes may be illustrated by a simple movement in physical action. If a physical movement began at a certain point and was caused to act with a circular tendency, it will finally come back to its starting point. It is the same with every conscious action that is deeply felt. It goes out into the vastness of the unconscious mental field, and having a circular tendency, as all mental actions have, it finally comes back to the point where it began, and in coming back, brings with it the result of every unconscious experience through which it passed on its circular journey. To go into the subject deeply and analyze every phase of it would be extremely interesting. In fact, it would be more interesting than fiction. It would require, however, a large book to do it justice. For this reason, we can simply touch upon the practical side of it, but we'll aim to make this brief outline sufficiently clear to enable anyone to direct his unconscious process in such a way as to secure the best results. Every mental process or every mental action that takes place in our wide-awake consciousness will, if it has depth of feeling or intensity, enter the unconscious field. And after it has developed itself according to the line of its original nature, will return to the conscious side of the mind. Here we find the secret of character building, and also the secret of building faculties and talents. Everything that is done in the conscious field to improve the mind, character, conduct, or thought will, if it has the sincerity and depth of feeling, enter the unconscious field, and later will come back with fully developed qualities, which when in expression constitutes character. Many a man, however, after trying for some time to improve himself and seeing no results, becomes discouraged. He forgets that some time always intervenes between the period of sowing and the period of reaping. What he does in the conscious field to improve himself constitutes the sowing. When those actions enter the conscious field to be developed, and when they come back, it may be weeks or months later, the reaping time has arrived. Many a time after an individual has given up self-improvement, he discovers, after a considerable period, that good qualities are beginning to come to the surface in his nature, thereby proving conclusively that what he did months ago along that line was not in vain. The results of past efforts are beginning to appear. We have all had similar experiences, and if we would carefully analyze such experiences, we would find that not a single conscious process that is sufficiently deep or intense to become an unconscious process will fail to come back finally with its natural results. Many a time, ideas come into our minds that we wanted weeks ago and could not get them at that time. But we did place in action certain deep, strong desires for those ideas at that particular time. And though our minds were not prepared to develop those ideas at once, they finally were developed and came to the surface. The fact that this process never fails indicates the value of giving the mind something to work out for future need. If we have something that we want to do months ahead, we should give the mind definite instruction now and make those instructions so deep that they will become unconscious processes. Those unconscious processes will, according to directions, work out the ideas and plans that we want for that future work, and in the course of time will bring results to the surface. To go into detail along the line of this part of our study would also be more interesting than fiction, but again, a large book would be required to do it justice. However, if we make it a practice to place in action our best thoughts, our best ideas, and our best desires now, and every moment of the eternal now, we will be giving the unconscious mental field something good to work for at all times. And as soon as each product is finished or ready to be delivered from the unconscious world, it will come to the surface and will enter the conscious mind ready to use. Some of the best books that have been written have been worked out during months of unconscious mental processes. The same is true with regard to inventions, dramas, musical compositions, business plans, and in fact, anything and everything of importance that could be mentioned. Every idea, every thought, every feeling, every desire, every mental action may, under certain circumstances, produce an unconscious process corresponding with itself. And this process will in every instance bring back to consciousness the result of its work. When we realize this and realize the vast possibilities of the unconscious field, we will see the advantage of placing in action as many good unconscious processes as possible. Give your unconscious mental world something important to do every hour. Place a new seed in that field every minute. It may take weeks or months before that seed brings forth its fruit, but it will bring forth after its kind in due time without fail. We understand, therefore, how we can build character by sowing seeds of character in this field, and how we can, in the same way, build desirable conduct, a different disposition, different mental tendencies, stronger and greater mental faculties, and more perfect talents along any line. To direct these unconscious processes, it is necessary to apply the finer forces of the system, as it is those forces that invariably determine how those processes are to act. These forces, however, are very easily applied, as all that is necessary in the beginning is to give attention to the way we feel. The way we feel determines largely what our finer forces are to be and how they are to act. And there is not an hour when we do not feel certain energies at work in our system. All the finer forces are controlled by feeling. Try to feel what you want done either in the conscious or the unconscious mental fields, and you will place in action forces that correspond to what you want done. These forces will enter the unconscious mental world and produce processes through which the desired results will be created. Whenever you want to redirect any force that is highly refined, you must feel the way you want that force to act. To illustrate, we will suppose you have certain emotions in your mental world that are not agreeable. To give the energies of those emotions a new and more desirable force of action, change your emotions by giving your whole attention in trying to feel such emotions as you may desire. And here, let us remember that every emotion that comes up in the system is teeming with energy. But as most emotions continue to act without any definite control, we realize how much energy is wasted through uncurbed emotions. We know from experience that whenever we give way to our feelings, we become weak. The reason is that every uncontrolled feeling wastes energy. A great many people who are very intense in their feelings actually become sick whenever they give way to strong or deep emotions. On the other hand, emotions that are controlled and properly directed not only prevent waste, but will actually increase the strength of mind and body. Here is a good practice. Whenever you feel the way you do not wish to feel, begin to think deeply and in the most interesting manner possible of those things that you wish to accomplish. If you can throw your whole soul, so to speak, into those new directions, you will soon find your undesired feelings disappearing completely. Every individual should train himself to feel the way he wants to feel, and this is possible if he will always direct his attention to something desirable whenever undesired feelings come up. Through this practice, he will soon get such full control over his feelings that he can always feel the way he wants to feel, no matter what the circumstances may be. He will thus gain the power not only of controlling his emotions and using constructively all those energies that invariably appear in his emotions, but he will also have found the secret of continued happiness. Whenever mental energy moves in a certain direction, it tends to build up power for good along that line. We realize, therefore, the value of directing all our attention upon those things in mind, character, and life that we wish to build and develop. In building character, we find the results to be accumulative. That is, we make an effort to improve our life or conduct, and thereby produce an unconscious process, which will later on give us more strength of character to be and live the way we wish to be and live. This in turn will enable us to produce more and stronger unconscious processes along the line of character building, which will finally return with a greater number of good qualities. The result of this action will be to give us more power to build for a still greater character, and so this process may be continued indefinitely. The same is true with regard to building the mind. The more you build the mind, the greater becomes your mental power to build a still greater mind. But in each case, it is the unconscious process that must be produced in order that the greater character or greater mind may be developed from within. In this connection, it is well to remember that the principal reason why so many people fail to improve along any line is because their desires or efforts for improvement are not sufficiently deep and strong to become unconscious processes. To illustrate, it is like placing seed on stony ground. If the seed is not placed in good, deep soil, it will not grow. You may desire self-improvement for days, but if those desires are weak or superficial, they will not enter the unconscious field, and no action, however good it may be, if it fails to enter the unconscious field, will also fail to produce results along the line of self-improvement. With regard to the building of character, we must also remember that character determines in a large measure the line of action of all the other forces in the human system. If your character is strong and well developed, every force that you place in action will be constructive. While if your character is weak, practically all your forces will go astray. This is not true in the moral field alone, but also in the field of mental achievement. If the character is weak, your ability will be mostly misdirected no matter how hard you may work or how sincere you may be in your effort to do your best. This explains why a great many people do not realize their ideals. They have paid no attention to character building, and therefore, nearly every effort that they may have made in trying to work up towards their ideals has been misdirected and sent astray. Whatever our ideals may be, therefore, or how great our desires may be to realize those ideals, we must first have character. And even though we may be able to place in action the most powerful forces in the human system, we will not get results until we have character. It is character alone that can give the powers of man constructive direction. And it is a well-known fact that those people who have a strong, firm, well-developed character easily move from the good to the better, no matter what the circumstances. What may be called the higher forces in man act invariably through our most sublime states of consciousness. And as it is these higher forces that enable man to become or accomplish more than the average, it is highly important that we attain the power to enter sublime consciousness at frequent intervals. No man or woman of any worth was ever known who did not have experience in these sublime states. In fact, it is impossible to rise above the ordinary in life or achievement without drawing more or less upon the higher realms of consciousness. People are sometimes criticized for not being on the earth all the time, but it is necessary to get above the earth occasionally in order to find something worthwhile to live for and work for while upon the earth. The most powerful forces in human life can be drawn down to earth for practical use, but to get them, we must go to the heights frequently. No one can write music unless his consciousness touches the sublime. No one can write real poetry unless he has the same experience. No one can evolve ideas worthwhile unless his mind transcends the so-called practical sphere of action. And no individual can rise in the world of attainment and achievement unless his mind dwells almost constantly on the verge of the sublime. Examine the minds of people of real worth, people who have something in them, people who are beyond the average, people who are rising in the scale, people whom we truly admire, people that we look up to, people who occupy high positions, positions that they have actually won through merit, and we find in every instance that their minds touch frequently the sublime state of consciousness. When we touch that state, our minds are drawn up above the ordinary, and mental actions are developed and worked out that are superior to ordinary or average mental actions. It is therefore simply understood that experience in sublime consciousness, if properly employed, will invariably make man greater and better. When we look upon a man that we can truthfully say is a real man, we find that something unusual has been or is being expressed in his personality. And that something unusual is hidden in every personality. It is a hidden power, a hidden force, which when placed in action gives man superior worth, both as to character, ability, and life. Real men and women, people who are real in the true sense of the term, are always born from the sublime state of consciousness. That is, they have, through coming in contact with higher regions of thought, evolved greater worth in their own minds and personalities. And as this possibility is within reach of every man or woman, we see the importance of dealing thoroughly with these higher powers in human nature. Whenever we touch those finer states in the upper regions of the mind, we invariably feel that we have gained something superior, something that we did not possess before. And the gaining of that something invariably makes life stronger as well as finer. The ordinary has been, in a measure, overcome, and that which is beyond the ordinary is being gradually evolved. If we would rise in the scale in the fullest and best sense of the term, we must pay close attention to those higher forces and make it a practice to enter frequently into close touch with higher states of consciousness. In fact, we simply must do it, because if we do not, we will continue to move along a very ordinary level. Then we must also bear in mind that it is our purpose to use all the forces we possess, not simply those that we can discern on the outside or that we are aware of in external consciousness, but also those finer and more powerful forces which we can control and direct only when we ascend to the heights. In dealing with these greater powers in man, it will be worth our while to reconsider briefly the psychological field. As long as the mind acts on the surface of consciousness, we have very little control of those finer elements in human life. But when the mind goes into the depths of feeling, into the depths of realization, or into what is called the psychological field, then it is that it touches everything that has real worth or that has the power to evolve, produce, or develop still greater worth. It is the active forces of the psychological field that determine everything that is to take place in the life of man, both within himself and in his external destiny. We must therefore learn to act through the psychological field if we would master ourselves and create our own future. The psychological field can be defined as that field of subconscious action that permeates the entire personality, or that fills, so to speak, every atom of the physical man on a finer plane. The psychological field is a finer field permeating the ordinary, tangible, physical elements of life. And we enter this field whenever our feelings are deep and sincere. The fact that the psychological field determines real worth, as well as the attainment of greater worth, is easily demonstrated in everyday experience. When a man has anything in him, his nature is always deep. The same is true of people of refinement or culture. There is depth to their natures, and the man of character invariably lives in that greater world of life and power that is back of or beneath the surface of consciousness. If there is something in you, you both live and act through the deeper realms of your life, and those realms constitute the psychological field. Among the many important forces coming directly through emotion or feeling, one of the most valuable is that of enthusiasm. In the average mind, enthusiasm runs wild. But we have found that when this force is properly directed, it becomes a great constructive power. When you are enthusiastic about something, it is always about something new or something better, something that holds possibilities that you did not realize before. Your enthusiasm, if properly directed, will naturally cause your mind to move towards those possibilities. And enthusiasm is readily directed when you concentrate attention exclusively upon that something that inspires enthusiasm. By turning your attention upon the thing that produces enthusiasm, the mind will move forward toward those greater possibilities that are discerned. This forward movement of the mind will tend to renew and enlarge the mind so that it will gain a still greater conception of those possibilities. This will increase your enthusiasm, which will in turn impel your mind to move forward still further in the same direction. Thus, a still larger conception of those possibilities will be secured, which in turn will increase your enthusiasm and the power of your mind to take a third step in advance. We thus realize that if enthusiasm is directed upon the possibilities that originally inspired that enthusiasm, we will not only continue to be enthused, but we will, in that very manner, cause the mind to move forward steadily and develop steadily, so that in time it will gain sufficient power to actually work out those possibilities upon which attention has been directed. In this connection, we must also remember that we can grow and advance only as we pass into the new. It is new life, new thought, new states of consciousness that are demanded if we are to take any steps at all in advance. And as enthusiasm tends directly to inspire the mind to move towards the new, we see how important it is to continue not only to live in the spirit of enthusiasm, but to direct that spirit upon the goal in view. It is invariably the enthusiastic mind that moves forward, that does things, and that secures results. Two other forces of great value belonging to this group are appreciation and gratitude. Whenever you appreciate a certain thing, you become conscious of its real quality. And whenever you become conscious of the quality of anything, you begin to develop that quality in yourself. When we appreciate the worth of a person, we tend to impress the idea of that worth in our minds, and thereby cause the same effect to be produced, in a measure, in ourselves. The same is true if we appreciate our own worth in a sensible and constructive manner. If we appreciate what we already are and are ambitious to become still more, we focus our minds upon the greater and employ what we already possess as stepping stones toward the greater attainment. But when we do not appreciate ourselves, there are no stepping stones that we can use in attaining greater things. We thus realize why people that do not appreciate themselves never accomplish much, and why they finally go downgrade in nearly every instance. When we appreciate the beautiful in anything, we awaken our minds to a higher and better understanding of the beautiful. Our minds thus become, in a measure, more beautiful. The same is true with regard to any quality. Whatever we appreciate, we tend to develop in ourselves, and here we find a remarkable aid to the power of concentration, because we always concentrate attention perfectly, naturally, and thoroughly upon those things that we fully appreciate. Thus, we understand why it is what we tend to develop in ourselves, the things that we admire in others. Whenever you feel grateful for anything, you always feel nearer to the real quality of that particular thing. A person who is ungrateful, however, always feels that there is a wall between himself and the good things in life. Usually, there is such a wall, though he has produced it himself through his ingratitude. But the man who is grateful for everything places himself in that attitude where he may come in closer contact with the best things everywhere. And we know very well that the most grateful people always receive the best attention everywhere. We all may meet disappointment at some time and not get exactly what we wanted, but we shall find that the more grateful we are, the less numerous will those disappointments become. It has been well said that no one feels inclined to give his best attention to the man who is always knocking. And it is literally true. On the other hand, if you are really grateful and mean it, it is very seldom that you do not receive the best attention from everybody wherever you may go. The most important side of this law, however, is found in the fact that the more grateful you are for everything good that comes into your life, the more closely you place your mind in contact with that power in life that can produce greater good. Another among the finer forces is that of aspiration. No person should fail to aspire constantly and aspire to the very highest that he can possibly awaken in his life. Aspiration always tends to elevate the mind and tends to lift the mind into larger and greater fields of action. And when the mind finds itself in this larger field of action, it will naturally gain power to do greater things. We all realize that so long as we live down in the lower story, we cannot accomplish very much. It is when we lift our minds to the higher stories of the human structure that we begin to gain possession of ideas and powers through which greater things may be achieved. The same is true of ambition. Ambition not only tends to draw the mind up into higher and larger fields, but also tends to build up those faculties through which we are to work. If you are tremendously ambitious to do a certain thing, the force of that ambition will tend to increase the power and ability of that faculty through which your ambition may be realized. To illustrate, if you are ambitious to succeed in the business world, the force of that ambition is very strong, will constantly make your business faculty stronger and more able, so that finally your business ability will have become sufficiently great to carry your ambition through. You cannot be too ambitious provided you are ambitious for something definite and continue to give your whole life and soul to that which you expect or desire to accomplish through that ambition. When we know the power of ambition and know that anybody can be ambitious, we realize that anyone can move forward. No matter what his position may be or where he may be, he can, through the power of ambition, begin to gain ground and continue to gain ground indefinitely. The average mind, however, has very little ambition and makes no effort to arouse this tremendous force. But we may depend upon the fact that when this force is fully aroused in any mind, a change for the better must positively come before long. The force of an ideal is another among the finer forces that should receive constant and thorough attention. When you have an ideal and live for it every second of your existence, you place yourself in the hands of a drawing power that is immense. And that power will tend to draw out into action every force, power, and faculty that you may possess, especially those forces and qualities that will have to be developed in order that you may realize that ideal. Have an ideal, and the highest that you can picture. Then worship it every hour with your whole soul. Never come down and do not neglect it for a moment. We all know very well that it is the people who actually worship their high ideals with mind and heart and soul that finally realize those ideals. It is such people who reach the high places, and the reason why is easily explained. Give your attention, or rather your whole life, to some lofty ideal, and you will tend to draw into action all the finer and higher forces of your system, those forces that can create greater ability, greater talent, greater genius, those forces that can increase your capacity, bring into action all your finer elements, and give you superior power and superior worth in every sense of the term. Those forces which, when aroused, cannot positively fail to do the work you wish to have done. A fact well known in this connection is that when the mind is turned persistently upon a certain ideal, every power that is in you begins to flow in that direction, And this is the very thing you want. When we can get all that is in us to work for our ideals and to work towards our ideals, then we shall positively reach whatever goal we have in view. Closely connected with our ideals, we find our visions and dreams. The man without a vision will never be anything but an ordinary man. And the people who never dream of greater things will never get beyond ordinary things. It is our visions and dreams that lift our minds to lofty realms, that make us feel that there is something greater and better to work for. And when we become inspired with a desire to work for greater and better things, we will not only proceed to carry out those desires, but will finally secure sufficient power to fulfill those desires. The nation that has no vision shall perish. This is a great truth that we have heard 1,000 times, and we know the reason why. But the same truth is applicable to man. If he has no vision, he will go down. But if he has visions, the highest and most perfect visions he can possibly imagine, and lives constantly to their realization, he will positively ascend in the scale. He will become a greater and a greater man, and those things that were at one time simply dreams will, in the course of time, become actual realities. The power of love is another force in this higher group that is extremely valuable. And the reason is that it is the tendency of love to turn attention upon the ideal, the beautiful, and the more perfect. When you love somebody, you do not look for their faults. In fact, you do not see their faults. Your whole attention is turned upon their good qualities. And here let us remember that whatever we continue to see in others, we develop in ourselves. The power of real love always tends to draw out into expression the finer elements of mind, character, and life. For that reason, we should always love much, and love the most ideal and the most perfect that we can discover in everybody and in everything that we may meet in life. We have all discovered that when a man really loves an ideal woman, or the woman that constitutes his ideal, he invariably becomes stronger in character, more powerful in personality, and more able in mind. When a woman loves an ideal man, or her ideal, she invariably becomes more attractive. The beautiful in her nature comes forth into full expression, and many times the change is so great that we hardly believe that she is the same woman. The power of love, if genuine, constant, and strong, tends to improve everything in human life. And as this power is one of the higher forces in human nature, we readily understand the reason why. We can therefore, without further comment, draw our own conclusions as to how we will use this power in the future. The last of these finer forces that we shall mention, and possibly the strongest, is that of faith. We must remember, if we wish to use this force, that faith does not constitute a belief or any system of beliefs. It is a mental action, an action that goes into the very spirit of those things which we may think of or apply at the time we exercise faith. When you have faith in yourself, you place in action a force that goes into the very depth of your being and tends to arouse all the greater powers and finer elements that you may possess. The same is true when you have faith in a certain faculty or in a certain line of action. The power of faith goes into the spirit of things and makes alive, so to speak, the all that is in you. The power of faith also produces perfect concentration. Whenever you have faith along a certain line, you concentrate perfectly along that line, and you cause all the power that is in your mind or system to work for the one thing that you are trying to do. It has been discovered that the amount of energy latent in the human system is nothing less than enormous. And as faith tends to arouse all this energy, we realize how important and how powerful is faith. The effect of faith upon yourself, therefore, is beneficial in the highest and largest sense, but this is not its only effect. The more faith you have in yourself, the more faith people will have in you. If you have no confidence in yourself, you will never inspire confidence in anybody. But if you thoroughly believe in yourself, people will believe in you and in your work. And when people believe in you, you can accomplish 10 times as much as when they have no confidence in you whatever. When a man has tremendous faith in himself, he becomes a live wire, so to speak. It is such a man that becomes a real and vital power wherever he may live or go. It is such a man who leads the race on and on. It is such a man who really does things, and it is people of such a type that we love the best. They invariably inspire others to love the nobler life and to attempt greater things in life. And for this reason, their presence is of exceptional value to the progress of the race. To go into details, however, is not necessary. We all know and appreciate the value of faith. We all know that it is one of the highest and one of the greatest forces that man can exercise. We therefore realize how important it becomes to train ourselves to have unbounded faith in everything and in everybody at all times and under all circumstances. And this concludes Chapter 19. If you haven't done so, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell if you'd like to be notified with my next video. Now, head over to the next video for Chapter 20.